Everyone get out!
Hello tankers and tankettes, and welcome to the first tank review of 2014. It's been a little while since I did the last one, and I thought it was about time, and I've decided to pick a tank this time around that's quite close to my heart. It's this thing, it's the KV-2. Now, you'll immediately notice this isn't the World of Tanks client. This is in fact the Tank Inspector client, and I have mentioned it once or twice. Jingles has done a video, and I thought I'd try something a bit different. Obviously, I want feedback from you guys and gals as to whether you like this or not. But basically, I'm going to do the garage portion of the review actually in Tank Inspector, because it gives me access to, as you can see, a whole bunch of numbers that you just don't get in game. So, like I said, the KV-2, what is it? Well, if we look on the tech tree, which Tank Inspector does give us, it's one of the Tier 6 Soviet heavy tanks, and there are actually 3 of them. Now there's the 2 main lines that go up to the IS-7 and the IS-4, and then there's this thing out on its own, the KV-2, which these days does actually lead up to artillery, S-51, and then you can go up to the Tier 10 arty that way if you really want to, you massive scumbag. But it is kind of odd in that it's out on its own like that, and there's a specific reason, because once upon a time there was this thing, the KV. This was once upon a time the Tier 5 Soviet heavy, and the tank model is still kind of in the game, as you can see, because I can still access the tank model. There's only one gun selection available, but both turrets are actually available. So this was the KV-1 turret and the KV-2 turret, which actually had the same amount of armour. You can see it looks a bit different, and obviously it had the 107mm available, it had the howitzer available. This was at Tier 5, and this was horribly overpowered at Tier 5, as you can imagine. So what Wargaming did was they split up the configurations, really. So we had the KV-1, and then the KV-2 got bumped up to Tier 6. So what makes the KV-2 special? Well, even though Tank Inspector keeps putting it to the 107mm gun, which is basically the same gun the T-150 gets, what makes it special is this gun here, the 152mm howitzer, which is really quite unique. It's a big gun. I mean, it's a really big gun. The only other tank in the game that gets 152mm howitzer, which I can actually show you very easily, even though I don't have one myself, is the Su-152, which, as its default gun, gets pretty much the same thing, 152mm derp gun, although the shell characteristics are somewhat different, so it's not exactly the same gun. The KV-2 is a tier lower, and it gets a turret, so that is immediately interesting. I will briefly mention the other 2 guns. It gets the U-11, the short 122mm derp, which you can mount on the KV-1 and the KV-1S. Don't think you can on the T-150, but I won't waste any time by checking. It doesn't matter anyway. This isn't about the T-150, it's about the KV-2, you guys. And like I've mentioned, it's a bit twitchy this, the 107mm, which is okay. It gets a decent rate of fire at Tier 6 on the KV-2. I think it actually gets a better rate of fire than the T-150. The big downside to using it is that you've got a massive, not very well armoured turret. And also, why would you use it when you could use this? Because this is just hilarious. In addition to this being in Tank Inspector, I'm not going to quite do my usual format, which is pros and cons, because the KV-2 is fairly unique. Like I've said, there's only one other tank that really mounts a gun that's quite like this, and it's the biggest howitzer, the biggest derp that is mountable on a turreted tank on any nation. Not that many nations get these derp guns. There's the Germans and the Americans get 105mm derps. The Russians get 122mm derp and this derp, and the British get the 3-inch howitzer and the 3.7, which the 3.7 is 94mm, so it's not quite as punchy as the 105mm, but it's still not bad. But this is basically the daddy derp. This is the biggest bang you can get on really any tank outside of artillery and tank destroyers. So, the first thing to say about the KV-2 is it is basically a KV-1 hull. This has its pros and cons. It's at tier 6, okay, it's at tier 6, and therefore the armor is less effective. But as we can see with Tank Inspector's handy dandy armor indicator. It not only gives you the actual armor, but also equivalent armor. So the side of the KV-1, when angled, or the side of the KV-2 rather, still the KV-1 hull, it's quite bouncy. I mean, you are occasionally going to bounce shots off that. The front armor is not quite as bouncy, but you see there, especially around that front plate there, that is potentially quite troll. Of course, there's a big ass turret. Like I said, it's not very strongly armored. You see there, 75mm frontal plate, 75mm all the way around. Big hatch on the back that's 60mm. So this is a big flat target, and therefore, even though it is the KV-1 hull, even though the angled armor can be quite bouncy, most people are going to shoot the turret anyway because it's a big target. The mantlet is, well, you can see it's kind of huge on the 152mm howitzer, and it can be bouncy, but it's maybe not as bouncy as you think. The best areas are basically here, the edges of the gun. You can see there it's equivalent to over 200mm between the actual armor and the spaced armor. The top of the mantlet as well, that's equivalent to over 300mm with the overlap there, and the bottom as well. You know, that's in fact the very edge there is nearly 400. That's kind of ridiculous. You'll also notice the angle that it gives is actually dependent on how I'm actually rotating the model in Tank Inspector. So that's a very nice feature of this. But like I said, the actual big mantlet itself, now the bottom edge is quite good, but the actual bit around the gun, you see there, it's only a 110. So it is possible to get pen through the mantlet. So if it happens, don't be massively surprised, because even though that looks massively thick, there is actually, it is just the 110. You see there on the indicator there, it's just the spaced armor. There's nothing behind that, so if it hits there, it will go through. So the mantlet will bounce some stuff, but if you get pen through the mantlet just around the gun, don't be too surprised. The other thing to note, which is an upgrade from the KV-1, is 600 horsepower engine, which is quite nice, and it's only 15% fire chance, which is also quite nice. So that's 100 more horsepower than the KV-1, and the speed limit is 35 kilometers an hour. So it's actually, I'm not going to say this is the fastest heavy tank ever, but it's not actually particularly slow. It's decent. You'll also see, this is my recommended setup in terms of equipment. The rammer and gun lane drive are really they're pretty much essential equipment, and the vents helps as well. Because this gun, let's take a look at the stats of the M10 now. This gun is, it packs a fair old wallop, but boy does it fire slowly. So with this setup, it's a 20.25 second reload, so that's just under 3 rounds a minute. And the accuracy is just horrible. I mean, it's the worst accuracy of any actual non-artillery vehicle in game, pretty much. 0.53, 0.56 rather. Even with all that equipment on it, you can improve it very slightly with some of the crew skills, but yeah. That said, while we're on the subject of accuracy, post patch 8.6, it's actually you can do a lot more really troll long range shots with this than you used to be able to. You can pull off some quite ridiculous shots with this gun these days, even though it looks like it's absolutely terrible and it should only be usable at close range, which before 8.6 it kind of only was. These days you can get away with much longer range shots, and when they hit, believe me, it is hilarious. Now you can see there the bloom after you've shot is absolutely massive, but the fact is the reload is so long that it makes this basically the ultimate peekaboo tank. You pull out a cover, you blap somebody in the face with your massive shell, you pull back for 20 seconds, and then you reload during all that time. So it's been like auto-loaders in that way. You have to have your teammates be good enough to cover you. Also note about the gun, you actually get 2 kinds of AP. This is actually the premium here. You might want to pack a few AP shells, but the majority of your ammo should be HE, because 152mm HE, it's not going to bounce really ever, and when it pens it is just hilarious. Now if we check the gun stats there now, I don't know if it tells me shell damage. No, that might be in the next screen. We'll go and quickly look at the numbers. Now, a nice thing about Tank Inspector is, yes, that's a lot of numbers, but if you want to see something specific, like say about the gun, we just mouse over the gun, hey presto. So 910 HE damage, and because it's an HE shell, if it pens, okay, kablamo, that's very nice. You're going to do someone a lot of damage, you're going to hurt a lot of modules with that. But even if you don't, it's going to explode on the outside of the tank, and you're going to do 300, 400 damage maybe. If someone's got a spore liner, it might be a bit less, but you're going to do damage, you're kind of guaranteed. And if you hit someone's tracks, boom, you're going to track them basically, and you're going to do a bit of damage as well. That's the nice thing about this gun. It scales very well to tier 8. It doesn't care that you're facing against, you know, an AC-48 or a KV-4 or whatever. The HE shell will just go boom on the outside, and that's, you know, damage done. So even though you're more in a support role when you're bottom tier, you can still do reasonable amounts of damage. And actually, I've had matches where I've been bottom tier and I've walked away with the best score because I've been damaging higher tier. So it's a very nice tank in that regard. You can also see some of the other stats there. It gives you anything that has an effect on, like say, the some of them are a bit odd, but I'm not really meaning this to be a review of Tank Inspector. It's just a very useful program, but it does show you all the kind of relevant information. So you can see that HE shells. So back to the model. So yeah, it's kind of a unique vehicle, and it's interesting, and it's derpy, and it's fun. And I would say the KV-2 is one you go for because you want the KV-2. Sometimes I see people asking, you know, do I go for the T150, the KV-1S, or the KV-2? Really, if you're wanting to progress up the lines, it's got to be the KV-1S or the T150, because those are the ones that go up to, you know, more tanks. If you're desperate to go to high tier arty, then you might skip through the KV-2. But for the most part, I think the KV-2 is one you go for because you want the KV-2, and because it's fun. I mean, it's just fun. It's one of the reasons why I like it so much. It's unpredictable. Even now with the accuracy changes after 8.6, it's still horribly unpredictable. Sometimes your gun will troll you so hard and you will just miss every shot, but sometimes you'll pull off a 400-meter one-shot kill and it's just glorious. So it's that unpredictable nature of it that makes it kind of fun, and the massive big derpy doom cannon that you get on this thing. So we'll quickly take a look at the armor and just at the actual armor model, and as you can see, it's quite easy in Tank Inspector. You just literally click the one button. This is basically what I was using the old What Armor viewer for before, and Tank Inspector basically combines that with all of the statistical information, so it's handy in that way as well. So like I said, it's the KV-1 hull, and you can see there it's fairly consistent 75mm all around the hull, 60mm at the back there. So the actual upper engine deck is but the things this is meeting at tier 6, the hull, the turret rather, it's kind of good enough to bounce some tier 4s, but because it's flat plate, even tier 4s aren't going to have a problem penning this thing, especially if it's helpless while reloading. There's the usual weak spots as well there, the MG port and the driver's port. You can see the upper front plate, it's sloped, but it's actually still fairly weak. And the tracks count for the more or less usual 20mm of spaced armor as well. So there used to be once upon a time, you know, jokes about the magic KV-1 tracks that ate all of the armor, but it's a bit less, you know, since the accuracy changes. It's a bit less of a thing these days. One other thing I will note about the KV-2 is you can see there it's got a fairly prominent turret ring, and yes, it's the same 75mm of armor as the rest, but if you're aiming for that specifically, there may be a good chance you can actually jam the turret. It's a slow turning turret to begin with. If you can jam somebody's turret while they're playing one of these and you're playing against them, then you can seriously cripple somebody, even if they repair it. You know, if they don't have the repair kit to put it back to full health, a damaged KV-2 turret turns incredibly slowly. So that's a good way to take someone out. And as I was saying, really the strongest effective armor on this thing is parts of the gun mantlet, which are equivalent to quite a lot, apart from exactly around the gun itself, which is literally just that spaced armor. So there you go, there's the actual armor model for what that's worth. I will do a suggested upgrade path in the intermission, and then we will move on to some actual gameplay. So here we are, it's Steps. This is actually a fairly old replay. Well, I say old, it's 8.6, so old enough. One thing I haven't really mentioned up till now is the concept of shot management, and that's quite important when it comes to the KV-2. Now, clearly that long reload, you really ideally need to be using cover to duck behind, so you're basically playing peekaboo with the enemy team. And when I talk about shot management, I mean kind of like almost with artillery, because this is almost direct fire artillery with this gun. It's basically choosing what your targets are going to be very carefully, choosing the correct moment to actually pop out and blap them in the face, and on top of that also choosing the ground where you're going to fight as well. So it's more about choosing your targets and choosing when to engage them than where to engage them, because the where to engage them part it's kind of the same in most tanks, but with the KV-2 you're more thinking about cover, just because of those long reload times and the fact that you don't really have the armor to sit there and take a lot of punishment. You will bounce some shots, like I've said, but on the whole, what you really want to do is fire and then pull back. So this is, like I've said, Steps, and I know exactly where I'm going on this map because, of course, there is the knoll. Sort of, well, it's hard to tell from the minimap really, but on this side, or there we go. That's what I'm looking for. I can look at a minimap, you guys, and it's kind of okay. Top tier, which is good, but there are some fastish tanks on the other side. So this is actually taking a big risk when I'm doing this. And yep, get spotted. There's both KV-1Ss, so okay. The gun depression on this is not fantastic. It's -7, which you may have noticed. I didn't point it out when we were looking at Tank Inspector earlier, but I mean it's okay. -7 in context is the same as the Type 59, for instance. I mean it's okay. It's not fantastic. So there we go. That wasn't aimed. That was, well, it was pre-aimed. I knew there was a possibility someone would pop out. Someone did. Wasn't aimed for anywhere in particular, and that's, you don't really have to do it that much with the 152 mil gun. Okay, with the 107 gun, it's basically a normal tank gun. You aim for weak spots, or you aim for where you think you can pen. With the HE shells on this thing, it's not so much about aiming for weak spots or aiming where you think you can pen. It's just aiming for the enemy tank, and if it hits, it will do some damage. Now you'll notice already the other flank is totally screwy. This game is actually going to be a loss. Now the flank I'm on is, doing everything correctly here. And boom, there we go, finish that guy off. We're doing everything correctly here. This flank is basically fine. If the team had pushed down the other flank, had been able to defend the other flank, I think this could have easily been a win. but as it was, you know, this side was a win, the other side not so much, and it was the other side that counted. So that was one where I was, there's tanks there now. I was forced to make a snapshot, and even though this was patch 8.6 after the accuracy changes, which helped the KV-2 probably more than nearly any other tank in the game, it's still the case that popping out taking snapshots, this is a very inaccurate tank. But there we go, bam. That's what, three shells that have actually hit stuff, and already 1200 damage. So that's the power of this gun. It's nothing like, occasionally you'll get one-shot kills, and that's just hilarious. Your HE shell will pen and do full damage, and that's just, But more often than not, you're getting the 300, 400 damage. So there we go, 82, nice. That was nearly 400. Didn't one-shot him, unfortunately. 82's got lots of armor. This thing doesn't care. It's just blam, massive HE shell to the face, and that really takes care of even the most well-armored enemies. So we're pressing up now, and like I said, this flank is textbook. This flank is working beautifully. It's just a pity about the rest of the team. And there we go. That one actually went wild into the the tracks, I think, but it exploded anyway. Boom, he died. 1780 damage. And there's still a couple of things, at this point I figure, okay, we've lost. So try and do a bit more damage, basically. Now this is the point where shot management comes into, I could have tried to take a wild snapshot at the SU-100. Would have been totally stupid. So if possible, you want to be shooting at the targets where you think your shell will be able to do the most damage, kind of thing. 2.2k damage. Easy. And it's all about managing those reload times. It's a little bit like autoloaders. It's like any tank with a long reload time. You have to find a way to manage those reload times. You have to find a way to cope with that, because normally, the compensation for a long reload time is the fact that you actually have a good gun. So they're capping. They've won this, basically. We're actually 9-10. We're very even on numbers. We dominated this flank. Unfortunately, they dominated the other flank, so that was that. That's all she wrote. But apart from that, this was actually a fairly a good exemplar of that kind of peekaboo tactic that you need to use with the KV-2 with this gun. And if you're not using this gun, then what the hell's wrong with you? Seriously. If you want to use the 107, then this gun is unique. I would say if you're going to play the KV-2, play it with this gun, because this gun is fantastic. Now, as we see with that team, just quickly glance at the results there. I did the most damage by... There was a Hellcat that did over 1k, and then everybody else was like 500, 600, 400. A couple of people with 0 damage. It was a pretty bad team, as it turned out. Yes, we did push that flank, but I did most of the damage on that flank. And even though the people around me weren't doing that much damage, what's crucial is that there were people around me, because a lone KV-2 is a very sad KV-2. It's very rare that you can actually get away with being on your own in a KV-2. And if you look back through my videos, you will actually see my KV-2 Ace Mastery game where just that happened. And I actually, because my enemies were basically afraid of my big gun, and let's not forget, with this big gun and the KV-2, there is that psychology factor. Somebody comes around a corner and sees that howitzer pointing at them, they're like, oh, okay, back up, which is a good thing. But even if you're on your own, just occasionally that can work in your favour, because sometimes people are such pancakes that even when you're fired, even when you've got that 20-second reload, they're afraid to come at you. And that's exactly what happened in my KV-2 Ace tanker game. It was Lakeville. You can even go and look up the video. I recommend it. It was actually kind of a derpy match, but it was derpy from the enemies I was facing, basically. I shouldn't have been able to get away with what I did, but I did. It was Lakeville, it was the Valley, and they kind of came at me one at a time, and they let me reload. And it was just magnificent. So if you're facing a KV-2, don't do that. Don't let them reload. Push on them. And if you're in a KV-2, don't be in a situation where you're on your own. Try and be with friendly tanks. If you're in a platoon, that really helps, because you've got someone to cover your ass. And use cover as much as possible. Don't get caught out in the open. Because you need that time. You either need to be popping out and shooting people at very close range where you're guaranteed to miss, or you need to be if you're firing at longer ranges, it's a bit trickier because it has a horrendous aim time. You really need to you need the space and the you know the time to work with that horrible aim time, because these days even at longer ranges you can still hit people for a lot of damage and it can be hilarious. So like I said, this isn't kind of my standard review because I kind of adopted a format of pros and cons of the tank, but the KV-2 is just, it's all about this gun. This is actually why the KV-2 was created. They took the KV-1 chassis and they built the turret around the M10 howitzer, and thus the KV-2 was born. And they actually used these things in battle, although I think they were mostly kind of knocked out by the mid-war kind of period. But there were some, I think, some fairly famous actions where KV-2s fought against German tanks. So it really is about. It's one of the most idiosyncratic vehicles in the game, but when it works, and oh boy, is it so much fun. So if you're going through the Russian heavy line for the first time, I would say maybe don't go for the KV-2 just yet, but certainly if you've got it unlocked and you go a little further up the Russian heavies and you want a vehicle to just derp around in and have fun, then that's, I think, the point where you want to get the KV-2, because it doesn't lead to anything in and of itself apart from artillery, but it is a fun vehicle to have, and it's an interesting addition to any garage if you like that kind of playstyle, and if you can stand the occasional frustration, or more than occasional frustration, of having shots wildly miss even at close range, because it's a freaking big howitzer derp cannon. It's like sometimes it trolls you as much as it trolls the enemy. And having said all that, it's horribly inaccurate and it's horribly unreliable, still somehow I find the KV-2 so much more fun than the KV-1S, even though the KV-1S is supposedly superior in a lot of regards. It's just, I find the KV-1S frustrating, even though it's got a better aim time and it's got better accuracy and it's got better mobility. Somehow the KV-2 is just more inherently fun, and I think that's the bottom line of this vehicle. If you're going to like it, you're going to love it, and if you're not going to like it, then there's probably not even a point in researching it. So yeah, like I said, a slightly different review than normal, but hopefully you've found this kind of helpful and useful, and it's given you some idea, some kind of feel for what the KV-2 is all about. So as always, if you thought this was useful, you can hit the like button, you can leave a comment below, you can subscribe to my channel, you can go check out my Facebook page, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.